learning as a verb, it is indeed as a verb, but I wrote is a verb there. If we're helping people to acquire learning and acquire knowledge and skills through an experience, then what I like about Big Picture is that it is an experience, and it can be an immersive experience. Now, if you've got a piece of paper in front of you that is that template that you can see on the wall behind me as well, then it can still be really immersive because you can get sucked into those different parts of the board. It is about igniting the wisdom in people, and that's what Big Picture helps me to do. So what I have done today is mapped out what I'm going to talk about, but on Big Picture. So if I step slightly over here, because I want to talk about how we land well. Actually, it could be dominated by the person who's leading it, and then how do we end really well so that people get the most out of the experience and go away with some of their freshest thinking. So I'm going to start with landing well. So we landed well because one of the things that happens when people come to an event for the first time is there can often be a little bit of apprehension and a little bit of uncertainty and anxiety about what might happen. Is this going to be a safe environment? And I think creating that psychological safety is super important. And of course we did that at the start because we were friendly and we chatted and we laughed and we found out where everybody hung out, and it's the simple stuff like that that makes a big difference. But people want to feel safe because you don't want to have a stress response in a learning environment. Sessions in people to take turns, getting people to take turns to speak. So one of the ways I do that, I have scribbled this, it's ugly, but when you were all talking before, I created just like a clock face, if you like, with everybody. Sorry, I'll do that again so you all can see it. But this is just everybody who's sat around the table, and quite often I'll use that to predict who is going to take a turn next. Because if you know about psychological safety, you'll know that there's a real emphasis on taking turns, having a fair amount of airtime, I guess.
As much as you say, go over, grab a cup of tea, do what you need. Obviously, we're talking face to face here. Go over with them, talk to them. How's their journey been? How they found it? How's the morning been? But you can still do this in this environment. What part of the world are you from? What's happening this weekend? Are you looking forward to the weekend? Oh God, I'm glad it's Friday. For me, it's adding that personal touch, so they see you not just as a facilitator, but as somebody who's really genuinely trying to link in with them.
Yeah, really good point. Great, Lisa. Thanks. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, just to follow on with that, I tend to make my sessions quite personable. So I'll ask quite a simple or almost a bit, of a personable question, something like, write in the chat, depending on the size of the group, write in the chat a hidden talent that you have, or something that somebody might not know about you, something that's going to start sharing a bit of information. Or I like to go the other way and say, I say, I don't want to know something amazing that you've done. Tell me something kind of low status that you've done, something everyday-ish that you've done. And that kind of, people start kind of associating with that, and it kind of builds up this kind of nice, comfort in a group like you was talking about before.
Yeah, and starting with a question is really, really helpful. One of the things that we structure into our sessions is just an opening round of appreciation. So appreciation for something that's happening in our world at the moment. So if I come to you, Chris, in a second, my question is, what has brought you joy this week? What would you say, Chris? And then I'll come to Bryce. So Chris, what's brought you joy this week? Who's got little people?
That's a great answer, by the way.
I did it without my lips moving as well.
It's amazing. Chris, what's brought you joy this week?
I'm going to bring it back to Big Pick, actually. Getting to version 0.5 of the Essentials Guide with Martin.
Fantastic.
After a couple of fairly marathon editing sessions, and you may have seen #RedPen mentioned on one or two of Martin's posts. Well, I'm the guy behind #RedPen, or at least the red pen bit of it.
Fantastic. It's good to know the man behind the red pen. So, Bryce, I said I was going to come to you next. What's brought you joy this week?
I'm going to duck that question actually, because I'd rather go back and answer your previous one, which is how do you work with people when you first engage? And what I have found to be effective is having check-ins and getting everybody to tell us something about what's happening in their lives at the moment, because often people are sitting there stressed and worried, and they've got things they'd like to tell someone about, good things or bad things. And it does help you, if you're facilitating, to understand why someone's quiet or why someone's particularly active, etc., etc. And it can actually be very revealing over time as a group learns to trust you and each other, because people then share things with you that are actually quite central to their lives.
Fantastic. And what you're making me think about, Bryce, is where the props come in. So I'm just going down here because this is where my props live. Okay. So this is the team symbol. So this is when you're thinking about the people in your organisation, the people in the businesses that you're working with. Giving people an opportunity to grab a sticker and put a sticker on their piece of paper that says, this is me, this is my name next to this sticker, this is where I hang out in the organisation. And then to answer that kind of question, Bryce, is perfect. So straight away, people are starting to feel more human, but also starting to interact with the materials they've got in front of them. And often when faced with a large piece of paper that is pristine and lovely, people are really nervous about actually putting something on there because they don't want to spoil it. My daughter hates getting things wrong on pieces of paper. So she will, if she wants to correct something, she'll actually throw it away and start again. She doesn't like to rub mistakes out. And I think people carry that with them. So people want to make their thing perfect. What I'm hoping is today, whilst Martin and I are talking with you, that you're just going to scribble all over your A4 big pick and actually capture the things that occur to you in your freshest thinking as we go along. So using stickers and the props and the small tokens that Martin was showing earlier, just to trigger that interaction. And I think often when people have got a physical thing in their hands, it actually makes the conversation easier. There's something very tactile, and it changes the nature of the interaction. So some of the other things that I think are super important at that landing well stage is that you, as the facilitator, ooze ease. So oozing ease is the thing. And it can be really easy, I think, sometimes when you're in a live, if you're used to delivering in an in-person situation, I think that it can come really easily to you. And then making that switch to virtual, I think, can be hard because you're trying to think about the tech as well. I mean, Martin and I are both here today so that I can talk about the content and Martin can drive the tech for the most part, because then I can be more easeful around my interaction with you and not have to worry about what's happening with the tech. So some of that I think is really important as well. So I showed you my thing before. It's not showing up because I've got a background. So that is my table. So more often than not, what I will do is I'll prepare that beforehand with a group of people, and when it comes to taking turns and adding our input, people will take a turn in that order, and everybody knows it's really predictable, so everybody knows when it's their turn, everybody knows they're going to get a turn, and everybody knows who goes before them, and it creates more of that psychological safety. So setting up those boundaries and making that easy at the beginning makes people land well, creates that safety. But we've got to switch them on, and we've started switching them on by getting them to interact with the piece of paper in front of them. It might be as easy as, I'm going to point, I don't know when my finger's going to disappear, but it's disappearing. But like, I've written my name on my piece of paper, and it's straight away interacting with the prop makes a difference. I was on a webinar. This, Adam, might be where we met. Was it a Rob Geraghty webinar? It was. Rob, you're on mute.
What I was going to say. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, it was Rob Geraghty. Yeah.
Excellent. That's where I knew you from.
And that makes sense. That connection makes sense because Rob was kind enough today to share the innovation thing around these slides that I've got up. And then wonderfully, Adam and I have only known each other 3 or 4 hours, but you know we're getting on fine. But that makes perfect sense.
It's all good. It's all good. So what was I going to say then? Oh yeah, so Rob does this great thing where when you come in, he lets you change your name. So he says, you know, put in your name on here, who you are and where you hang out. So rather than that conversation, I mean, it can still be a conversation, but it's a great way to engage people. And it's the same with Big Picture. You've got physical, tactile props that you can get people to interact with. So straight away it breaks down the boundaries. And there's something, in terms of the physical kit, there's something about stickers that is really lovely. I don't have a roll of stickers in my hand right now, but it's a real childlike thing, isn't it? To be given a piece of paper and some stickers and carte blanche to where you stick them. There we go. Sim rolls. It's a really nice experience, and it ignites that inner child, that 7-year-old that likes getting a reward sticker for something, and suddenly you're saying you can play with those as well. So I think there's some of the things that start to switch people on. So we're down in the switch people on, down there at the bottom. And that's about switching people from the passive to the active. So there's lots of situations where I've had workshops where people have said by the end of them, particularly on Zoom, I wasn't expecting that. I thought you were just going to come on and show me a load of slides, fill my head with stuff, and I'd go away again. And I go, but you asked me questions and you made me participate and you sent me off into a room to have a conversation with a stranger. And all of that it switches the learner from a very passive state to receiving stuff into that engaged and switched on state where they're ready to have their own thinking. And that, as I said at the beginning, is what I think Big Picture does, is create that little spark where people say, oh, I can think something new for myself right now that is nothing to do with what I came in with knowing. This is completely fresh. I think putting yourself on the board, as I've said, is a really great way to switch people on. Naming yourself, like I've said, that Rob does, getting the date on the piece of paper. On the digital kit, there's a lovely tool drawer. So you click on an icon and a thing appears on screen. If you've not seen it already, a little drawer pops out. And that kind of interaction just helps people get super comfortable. So how do you switch your learners on? Precious, can I come to you in a second? And then Sarah, I'm going to ask you. So what is the stuff that you do, Precious, that really turns your learners' thinking brain on so they can have their own fresh thoughts?
So for me, the first thing is to build rapport, and I'll explain what I mean. So I hold training sessions across Africa. I've trained for multinationals like ExxonMobil, where you have people across different cultures, for example, and then do training here. So for me, typically when I get in the room, I want to build rapport. I want to know the nature of the audience. Who am I meeting today? So tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. It's always so fascinating. And when you ask people to talk about themselves, people like to talk about themselves. And I find that in sessions, many of the sessions that I have where people feel engaged is where they actually spoke. Nobody wants to go to a class where they didn't have an opportunity to get their voice in. So tell me about yourself. And I also do, I think it was Chris who talked about what's happening, around you. I mean, what did you observe? And if I'm holding the session in Lagos and the foreigners, the first thing you hear is, oh, the traffic, it's exotic, it's this, and then, I just follow their cues, right? I follow their cues. So it's very situational for me. I try not to have a standardized template. So I'm not like, some robotic kind of person. So I go in there, I check my audience on.
Oh no, Precious, you're frozen.
I find that if you're able to build rapport, they forgive anything else you do. So if you have great rapport with your class, even when you make mistakes as an instructor, they're fine. They're cheering you on, you're collaborating, and then you have, an unforgettable learning experience.
So that's lovely, and that I'm going to fire another symbol up, okay? Because the process, this is the process symbol if you've not seen it before, the experience that you give people in the classroom, if you're able to work in the classroom at the moment, and the experience you give them online, trying to replicate those two things or mimic the classroom online, I think is really important. So that human approach you're describing, Precious, is the thing that helps a learner feel that they matter and that they are super important to you, but that's one of the things that activates their thinking. I've got an opinion, somebody cares, someone's asking me, I'm important in this situation, so I'm going to do my best thinking for this person. So yeah, lovely insight. Sarah, I said I was going to come to you. What do you do to switch people on?
I'm glad Precious went first, actually, because it kind of bubbled up more ideas and things like that. So for me, because I'm mainly, I'm either in a blended learning space in terms of combining instructor-led training virtually now, or I'm doing digital courses and customized courses for clients. What I found is, connecting and building rapport usually starts with sort of kick-off sessions at the beginning to find out their needs, their requirements, and also to have like a sort of really human-centered approach. So anybody with any sort of instructional design background would know that the number one thing you have to do when you're working online and producing online learning is know your audience. So know who it is that you're creating that content for, and also to make sure that it's very open, equitable and inclusive content, so that it's representing representative of the world, like this session is today. And so for me, really, in terms of sort of ice breaking and things like that, it can be discussions around where you're from, who you are, all of those aspects. But action mapping is one technique that's been used in the instructional design community for a while, and it leverages things like Julie Salmon's scaffolding theory, for those of you in the learning community that have heard of that, and also Grenade Connell's 7 C's of learning design, which I could just talk about this forever, because I'm really passionate about making sure that learning is accessible for everybody, but also equitable, particularly for things like upskilling projects, for people who are kind of like in communities where there might be some digital divide challenges. So, there's those communities around the world where perhaps there isn't a decent internet connection, there is no Wi-Fi or fibre, and so they're sort of on a 2G mobile. So what does learning look like for them, particularly in the current pandemic? So, yeah, there's just so much there that to share, but I don't want to waffle on for too long. But yeah, digital pedagogies, open learning, OERs, OEPs, communities like this. Really valuable stuff.
Yeah, it is really valuable stuff, isn't it? And giving people an opportunity to share that, I think, is really super valuable, because you leave with something you didn't know before, you can apply it to your situation. And talking about equality as well, I think that's where, again, big picture gives everybody their own voice. So I'm invested in this piece of paper or this board or this digital kit, but I am invested. I can put my sticker, or what have I got here? My technology symbol. I can stick that anywhere I choose. You can't make me do that. And so the power lies in the hands of the individual to create their own representation of whatever the business, product, service, challenge, training plan, whatever it is, to create that representation themselves and for the power to be in their hands. So that's one of the things that I particularly love. And I think what it also does is it exposes the difference. So it exposes the cognitive diversity in the group. It gives everybody, oops, my frisbees have fallen on the floor. It gives everybody an opportunity to contribute in the way that they want to. So I know with some of our experiences, Martin, we've had people who've got really giddy and excited about a symbol and gone, no, it's this. We've got it. It's this, and it goes here. And you get a 3-dimensional view of people, because they're not just. It's not a linear experience. It allows for their passion and their emotion, their feelings to come out when they're talking about what could be a really boring topic. But it allows people to express themselves, and it stops just that homogenized one voice that really doesn't lead to creativity and innovation. So in terms of creating equality in the group, it'd be really good to hear some of the things that you guys do. So I'm wondering if I can just surprise Gary with that question, and then I'll ask Huel. So Gary, what do you do to create that equality? And you'll need to take yourself off mute.
Create equality when I'm leading sessions. Well, I think to build on what people have said so far. So Precious made a good point earlier on about rapport. So rapport is incredibly important between an instructor and a learnee. But I think you need to try and build rapport between the attendees as well. So so everybody needs to be comfortable and feel encouraged and enabled to contribute in whatever way, shape, or form they wish. So some people don't like, even if they know the people there or they don't know the people there, they don't like to put their head above the parapet and say something in a forum-based scenario. And I think it's recognizing that, and not, I think there's a lot of strength in going to people and asking people questions, but it's knowing when people want to be asked questions or not. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard to say, what do you do for this and what do you do for that? You kind of really need to feel it, I think, and that's where that sort of first discussion comes from, where you ask them where they're from or what the hobbies are. Or I really like a thing called Three Good Things. It's a positive psychology model. I did a personal project over it during lockdown, and it's asking what 3 good things you're grateful for today. Things like that, you kind of get a feel on who's going to jump in and say things and who isn't, and then you can gauge the rest of your session for equality purposes off.
I love that everyone's talking about how human sort of learning needs to be, and humans play, and this is about playing. This is a tool that encourages play. So that's really nice. I really like what you're saying there, Gary. So Hugh, I said I'd come to you next. What do you do to create equality in your sessions?
And am I on unmute?
You are unmuted. I can hear you beautifully.
Oh, bless you. So I'm just going to take it aside a little bit. I know you're talking about training, and I am a certified trainer. But I used to use a tactic when I was also doing consultancy, but in the same sort of environment. And I'll share one with you, which is really important for equality. It's basically to do with meetings. It was coaching people how to run successful meetings. And this particular, we're talking about the Middle East now, so maybe we're different types of people. But when I was out in the Middle East, they were having a problem with having effective meetings because heads of departments would be in charge of the meeting. And obviously, when a question was asked, everybody would just nod their head if they thought that's what the head of department wanted. And if the head of department didn't want them to say yes, they would say no. And so I went in the day before this particular meeting and I said, tomorrow in the meeting, you're not going to run the meeting. And he said, what do you mean I'm not going to run the meeting? I said, I'm going to have somebody else run this meeting. Oh, no, I can't do that. And I said, yes, I'm going to ask you to sit as one of the participants. We're going to select somebody to run your meeting so that now we're on an equal footing. And you're going to allow this person to run the meeting for you. And you're going to have at the end of this a lot more kudos from the people, because you're going to stop having them just saying what you want them to say, and you're going to see them actually reacting much better in that environment. So that's the type of thing that that I've done in classes and in as a consultant, is to try to create a level playing field by doing things like that.
That's a really nice example, and I remember Martin and I doing a piece of work together, which it reminds me of, because we did individual interviews with the team so that they could build their big picture. So they had complete control of what went on the piece of paper. They weren't influenced by anyone else. It was just us asking the questions, and they built that picture. And then we presented that to the whole team together as like a gallery, like an art gallery, and have a little wander through and see what you see. And in terms of creating a shared view, it was super powerful, that group of people, to identify the real risks and challenges that their organisation had, and the opportunities. And it equalised everybody, because they didn't have to listen to the hippo, the highest paid opinion in the room. They got to see each other's thinking in really visual terms. So it's a great leveller from that point of view. Mm-hmm. Marvellous. So, Martin, we didn't agree a signal if you wanted me to shut up.
No, well, the signal is I've filled a page of my book now, so I can't go on to another page. So basically that's looking at the clock and looking at my page. I think what I might want to do is just draw some things out there to just shine a light, and thanks to Bev for taking us through that. What I noticed is when we practice this form of facilitation, there is often a pause, there's a sigh, there's a thinking time, I've seen those visual clues. That's all right. Actually, a little bit of confusion sometimes is okay as well. As long as it's in a safe environment, we are really wanting to activate ourselves and each other. So I'm just going to whip through my notes and shine a light on some of the things that Bev's picked up on. There's no right or wrong, and often we ask for authority. I hear the term, am I allowed to? I use that term myself sometimes for playful purposes. But actually, yes, people are allowed to. And of course, what they think at the time is their truth. And if they're willing to share that, that's interesting in itself, even though it might not be in line with what we might call the official line. That is a more interesting discussion topic rather than a less interesting discussion topic. And I think we're conditioned in a way, and I think it's a shame, top-down organizations' hierarchies suggest that we are conditioned to not speak out and to say what is expected rather than say what we think. And I think engagement surveys and question and answer dialogues don't help with that, because you can think too quickly and easily about what question it is and what answer you should give. And I don't know whether there's anyone in the room who has answered a question and answer engagement survey and not in any way thought about what answer would be a good one to give. And the question and answer dialogue gives that. I think using these symbols that Bev has kind of passed to me over the pennines is that as they fell on the floor, they fell onto my plate. So basically, making connections between symbols is better and richer and more interesting because it's more like the brain thinks. I'm going to whip through these for time. I said I'd come back to it, but we haven't used the digital kit today, but we are in a Zoom technology platform. It hasn't felt like that all the time. It's felt more like we've been in the room. Because we're using familiar symbols and because big pictures distill down the complexity of our work in this form, then that allows us to transfer physical to digital and back again. It then becomes just a question of what's the content rather than what's the medium. And I think that gets flipped over sometimes. So to flip between digital and physical, you need something that simple. It doesn't have to be big picture. Big picture is just one way of doing it. But if you have a framework that is simple, it does enable you to switch between platforms quickly, because once you've got the familiarity that this is a technology symbol, then you can use that in physical and digital space. I love the rapport, the people, the human side. It's very primal, it's visceral. They're not words that you often see in the workplace, but I don't shy away from using it. We have very basic and important needs as humans. And I love the fact culturally and internationally, we're appealing to a wider and more diverse audience. I mean diverse in the sense of ideas. We're actually made up very similar, probably more similar than we think, and actually present people with a reasonable framework, then they will work with it, and it has to be straightforward, and it has to be inclusive and accessible. I'll pick up something else on the human thing. I've drawn a little picture. Often talk about rapport going up and down the organization. When I gave my example earlier, you might have noticed, I did to myself, that I was talking about rapport between colleagues. So peer-to-peer rapport when we're not even involved. We might be what I call windowsill facilitation, sat at the back of the room on a windowsill, virtually or physically, whilst 2 or 3 or 5 colleagues all go at it, but they only have 3 challenge symbols, so they better get on with it and work out which are the top 3 challenges, etc. And there's always that magical moment when that happens. Bev talked about responsibility. I think the shift of responsibility, encouraging that to go out to our participants and our colleagues, massive supporter of that. And I talk about holiday snap. When you get to the end of a session, big picture or not, take a picture of them with it. They might have signed it. It's their ink on the page. It's their move on the board. Getting a picture of that in some form, whether it's exporting a PDF or actually taking a picture of them with it, is a way to connect their work and their commitment to what they produced. It's their content, not yours, which is why at the end of the big picture session, often is the case that facilitators or practitioners like me do not walk off with it. It's their content. We take the digital image they keep the master version because it's theirs. And as Bevis says, that's wonderful when you set it out. I'm just going to end on the game metaphor. We have a game board, we have counters, we have prompt cards that we use in Big Picture. We all love a game and to be involved, and there's nothing better to include and to be inclusive to our colleagues than to involve them in that dynamic. It doesn't have to be complex, and it doesn't have to be kept for the in-crowd who understand the agile words or anything else. It is a point about including everyone. And I think we've covered, I'm going back to learning is a verb, Bev. I think we've got the doing bit in there. We've not just unpacked the term, we've actually given some demonstration as well. So we are bang on time. I would thank Bev so much for co-hosting. Thank everyone in attendance.